NHL news is trending, and that means the NHL season is on the horizon. And on the latest edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, it's all of the top news from around the league that's impacting your fantasy squad. Let's break it all down for you and get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, my fantasy fanatics? Welcome back inside the lab to your daily 30-minute source for all things fantasy hockey, NHL news, and very soon, Mr. Rodin, nightly betting breakdowns. It is September the 25th, and we are here holding it down for the everydayers who continue to make us their first listen every single day. Even on today's episode, that's brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers to FanDuel right now, that bet $5 and win. Get 300 in bonus bets back in the account. There's a lot of B's there, Steele, and I'm going to spit it out. But what I would like to spit out on today's show is we are your 30-minute source for everything hockey. Fantasy, news, bets. We'll get it all to you in 30 minutes, Monday through Friday. Over to you, though, because, look, a number of things are going down in the league. I was just talking to you about Ovi. Yesterday, we spoke about injuries to other players, David Pasternak. GM's got to know what's going on around the league. So, Stolarz, Carter Hart, Edmonton Oilers. Over to you, my friend, wherever you want to start. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, start with the Maple Leafs. We haven't talked enough about them all summer long, so let's just get the season underway with our favorite team in the National Hockey League, Joseph Woll, with an indefinite leave of absence from the Maple Leafs team right now. And obviously, when that broke, my thoughts exactly just go to he's obviously missing the first week of the season. I mean, they don't come out with this unless he's actually going to miss some hockey. You know, obviously, from a media standpoint, you obviously want the fans to know what's going on. But for that to come out right now, he's most likely missing the first week of hockey. So it's big news. Anthony Stolarz is now the number one guy for the Maple Leafs going into this season when we had the expectations of it being a 50-50 split. So Anthony Stolarz' value, it goes up big time in my opinion. I mean, you know how I feel about this player. I like him a lot. He was on multiple of my fantasy leagues last year. He cracked the top 10 for me when we talked about our favorite or the best goaltenders going into this year. And, you know, I want to go back and forth with you on Anthony Stolarz, but just looking at where the Yahoo experts had him ranked, they had him ranked as the 15th best fantasy goaltender at 106. When you look based off of fantasy total projections going into the season, he was ranked 38th. And based on where his average draft position is going right now, 66.8, which is in round 5, this is one of the best goaltenders in the league. And obviously, when you implement the 0G strategy, I mean, I got him last year in the 15th round. You're not going to get him that late anymore. There's expectations for Anthony Stolarz this year, and he's going high, and people have taken notice. They are big expectations. I have a lot more to say about Stolarz, but I want to hear your thoughts on exactly where he ranks going into the season now with Woll on the, I guess, technically IR.
I think outside of the top 15 seems a little bit disrespectful considering how good he was last year. And what I'm starting to realize, Steele, and we do so many rankings, previews, projections, a lot of what goes into the season should really mostly lie in what they did last year. And I know a lot of things come into play, but I think the more that we do these, the more that I think the previous year should hold more water. I do it myself. I look at too many other things, and I've even done it on a previous episode where I was taking heat for a bunch of guys in Washington. They had a great year last year, and I don't think it's going to translate. But that's what this is to a certain extent, right? We can look at numbers all day long, but the ones with Anthony Stolarz that stand out, 2.14 goals against last year, third best goals against in the NHL. These are statistics you have to pay attention to. My take is this. The statement on Joseph Woll, the no timeline, all of that leaves a lot of curiosity and concern because one of the strengths of this team, let's be clear, Stolarz or otherwise fantasy talk, was the duo in the cage for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The security blanket of if one gets hurt or struggles, you're pretty confident in the other guy getting wins. So that's out the window right now. But I think I agree with you in terms of there's going to be a lot of GMs getting really fired up to lock into Stolarz now because you don't have to worry about Joseph Woll, quote unquote,
And they should.
to start the year. And I get that. I guess I would also just say, I don't know, and no one else does, what's going on with Joseph Woll. However, for now, this definitely moves Anthony Stolarz up the board because even to start the year, if he goes on a heater and he's playing all these games, you're winning a couple of your weeks in these head-to-head leagues off the jump if you've got heavy play in the categories for goalies. So I'll turn it back over to you. I guess I would just say this, and I know you and I differ on some teams, and the Leafs might be one of them. The Leafs, for me, are in a precarious situation here. And Joseph Woll was one of the things that added a security blanket. Michelli up front, you know the guys on the back end are solid now. Mitch not being there, all the improvements in the Atlantic. I just think that the Leafs need to get off to a good start here, and I'm looking at Anthony Stolarz to hold down the fort. Fantasy-wise, this is good news for your boy, most definitely.
Look, I don't think they're in a precarious situation. I think this is one of the deadliest teams in the Eastern Conference still. They got meaner. They got tougher. They got Dakota Joshua. They got Nicholas Roy. It fills out that bottom six. The blue line is still absolutely solid. We loved it last year. And obviously, like you said, you want to have that security blanket of two really good goaltenders backing each other up. And Joseph Woll does that. But I have absolute faith in Anthony Stolarz. And exactly what you said. You look at the last 2 years, you know, him as a backup goaltender in Florida, he put up a .925 save percentage, 2.03 goals against average. You know, again, backup goaltender, you're like, okay, wow, this guy can actually play. He comes in as somewhat the number one guy in Toronto, gets injured, but still in 34 games, 21-8-3 record, a .926 save percentage. He was a top 3 goaltender in fantasy hockey last year, even with playing less than 40 games. I mean, he really is just a calming presence, a big goaltender, calming presence, great rebound control. And like I said, there are expectations for Anthony Stolarz this season. I think last year was a little bit of a surprise because he's never really done it by himself before or, you know, established himself in that regard. But you expect, again, depending on the games played this year, you expect 25 plus wins. You expect a 9-10, 9-15 save percentage. He might not be the flashiest, might not have a name brand, but he is a valuable asset to any team who drafts him. And I don't even think you're going to get him in if you wait till round 8. I mean, he's just such a really good goaltender. And now with Joseph Woll out, I think his value even goes higher.
Yeah, I don't know what ranking you were hitting me with off the top. To have him 15th or, you know, even out of the top 15 seems ridiculous, even if you do kind of.
It was the Yahoo experts ranking. The Yahoo experts ranking have him as the 15th best goaltender on the draft board, and overall ranking, it's like 106.
Yeah, like I guess it's not egregious. It's just, even if you're buying into the narrative that I am, that I think the Maple Leafs might be in tough this year to replicate 108 points, I don't think that's a bold take. I guess the last 2 angles that everyone was looking at headed into this season, that injury last year to knock him out of the playoffs, the concussion is a serious thing. That's an angle to sometimes consider for a goalie who's never had to be the number one. And Joseph Woll being there was obviously still something to consider. Yeah, you might not agree with me, Steele, but it's still something that has to be considered. However, now with Joseph Woll, at least in the short term, out of the picture, I could see him definitely a lot of GMs starting to reach on this guy a little bit, Steele. Let's see how it pans out. Let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers or more Anthony Stolarz, whatever you want, pal. This is our show. But what we try to do is always give you guys the fantasy hockey angles to arm yourself, not only to dominate the draft, but week by week, all season long. We got waiver wire Mondays. We'll have special guests, breakdowns, all of the news and bets that you need as well. We'll get to Carter Hart, the Edmonton Oilers, after the break. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is definitely here, and to make sure that you're ready for it, the friends at FanDuel, I always mention, have a can't-miss offer for you to put some money in your pocketbook right now. New customers that bet $5 and win that bet get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app, something Steele and I do quite regularly. Future bets, same game parlays, in plays. I don't know about you, Steele, might be sprinkling a few Ryder Cup bets. Go Team Europe. And at the end of the day, if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 wager.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, follow button, leave a 5-star review for your boys here, Flip Livingstone and Steele Rodin. Flip from one Canadian team to another. Let's go out west to the Edmonton Oilers. A lot of news, obviously, in the offseason, a lot looming around Connor McDavid's contract, when he'll sign, if he'll sign, where he'll sign.
Yeah.
It's big news. Zach Hyman as well. He's still out of the lineup. He won't be back, I believe, until at November, the earliest, this upcoming season. We just talked about who's going to be on that number one line with Connor McDavid going to start the year as well. Where do you want to start? Zach Hyman, Connor McDavid, who's playing on that top line? I mean, we just talked about it. Leon Draisaitl and him were playing together at practice. So, I mean, they do that every year, but where do you want to go?
At the end of the day, I think it all kind of fits together. Look, Hyman has been kind of a lock-in fixture alongside McDavid here since signing as a free agent back in 2021-22. 27 goals, 17 assists last season. He had 77 points the year before, dislocating the wrist back on May 27th. So, yeah, he's out that first start of the year, that first month, it's sounding like, Steele. So to me, it's like, look, all of the Connor McDavid noise, quote unquote, to me doesn't have a whole ton of fantasy impact. And what we always want to do with the news is try and tie it back into fantasy. So I think let's focus on what Zach Hyman's absence will be here, because I want to talk about the rest of the lineup. Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid playing together with Trent Frederic to start the year. It sounds like Knobloch's going to run that out. Even with all the time left between now and the start of the season, he's literally come out, and so he doesn't have to talk about it and go, these guys are going to play together. That's interesting, because now all of a sudden a player in Isaac Howard, who was catching all kinds of sleeper love and attention, Steele, if he's not playing with either of those two guys and he's got Kasperi Kapanen and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins on deck here, I'm not nearly as confident in taking a shot on him with a draft pick. That's number one. Number two, this team has some holes in it at the bottom six, Steele, and that might be obvious. But this is a situation. The pressure is on in Edmonton. So fantasy take for me here is be wary of what you're doing with Isaac Howard, because now that he's not going to get that start of the season look with the two players we thought he might, that's a little bit of a game changer. I don't know what your take is on even maybe considering drafting Zach Hyman and stashing him. That's a whole other angle. I'll turn it back over to you for what you're seeing from these Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, I mean, even with Hyman in or out of the lineup, I just think there's going to be a lot of moving pieces for the Edmonton Oilers. I don't think anything is really going to stick, because it hasn't in the past. I mean, even with McDavid and Draisaitl playing again, from what we've seen in practice, training camp, preseason, what it be is that usually is not what happens. They're usually the first and second line center. They're usually not playing together unless it's the power play. I mean, sometimes they're thrown out together, obviously, but they try to separate them as much as possible. And that's what we were talking about 2 episodes ago when we were talking about the Pacific Division sleepers, when we brought up the Edmonton Oilers. Like, we don't know who's going to be playing in the top 6 with them. Is it Mangiapane? Is it Howard? Is it Savoie? Is it Podkolzin? So that's where it becomes a little bit interesting, is, maybe you want to just take a step back and try to figure out, outside of McDavid and Draisaitl, who you want to draft in the later stages of your leagues. When it comes to Zach Hyman and his fantasy value, he's obviously a must-draft player. I'm not saying he's going in the 5th or 6th round or even as high as that, but you get to at least the 9th or 10th. He's got dual eligibility as left wing, right wing, and he has that flexibility. Even if he misses the first month, I mean, he's
draft
getting
him
put
and stash
right
him.
back. Yeah, you draft him and stash him, and then he's put back into a situation where he's playing either with McDavid and Draisaitl. He's gonna put up 50 points. I mean, he's not gonna have another career high, 50 goal season where he had 83 points or even 77 points. 50, 60 is where we relatively see him falling back down to. Still over 200 shots, over 80 hits, over 70 blocks, and so forth. Such a valuable player, has the flexibility. Even with the absence of him not in the lineup for the first month, you got to draft this player somewhere in the mid to early, late round of your draft.
And I think the main point there is even if you're feeling a little bit uncertain of it, he's going to go back on 97's left side. So that's probably all you need to really hear right there with that take.
And I think the same thing can be said with Matthew Tkachuk too, because he's out even longer till December.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Both of those guys are getting drafted and stashed. I think it just also really breaks down to how deep your league is there. Because if you do have a whole ton of really juicy options still in those rounds, which, in shallower leagues, you might have some really good players there, Steele, that probably push Hyman and Tkachuk down the board a little bit. What I did want to wrap up here with the Edmonton Oilers before we talk a little bit more about goaltending, which is, near and dear to our heart for not exactly. Ooh, that was a good one there with Hart. Anyway, we'll get to the rest of it after the break. This Edmonton Oilers team last year, Steele, offensively, 12th in the power play. That's got to be better. They are so offensively gifted for obvious reasons, and they set historically good postseason power play marks the season before. To come out and have the 12th best power play, to me, is unacceptable. 11th most goals in the NHL. When you have Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard in the cage, you got to be a top 5 offensive team, in my opinion. So that's not good enough as well. Unacceptable. And I think, and it might be tricky with their grease man up front, Hyman out, to start the year and avoid that big slump. This team has now gone a few in a row by starting okay and then reeling off ugly losing streaks that puts them behind the 8 ball. What does it mean for this club to start hot, stay hot, and run the table? We haven't seen that from McDavid and the Oilers. I think it's critical. It might be an obvious take, but when you see how they've kind of backed into a lot of situations over the last couple of years, at least from slow start standpoint, I would like to see what this means for the team's confidence if they can start hot, and that will mean good things for even fantasy pieces like Stuart Skinner, Mr. Rodin, who's a whole other batch of kittens that we'll have to talk about on another episode.
Yeah, we really do, because I'm not sure I can go down that road myself.
Yeah,
I mean, there's been a lot of goaltenders over at least the last 4 years almost. I mean, last year was the first time in a while where I felt very confident with my goaltenders in at least 75% of my leagues. You know how many bridges have been burned. Thatcher Demko, Jordan Binnington, Stuart Skinner. Okay. I can't go down that road today. We'll talk about it on a different episode. Let's talk about a different goaltender after the break, the potential of Carter Hart and what his value could possibly be if he makes a return to the National Hockey League. All of that and more coming up next after the break on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Share with your friends and family out there. Hit the subscribe button, the follow button. Leave a 5-star review. Once again, if you want to join our listener league, casual or competitive, send us a DM, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, give us your name, email, which preference of league you want to join. The cutoff date is this Saturday, September 27th. So if you want to join, there will be a draw. You could possibly participate this year if your name gets drawn. But once again, send those DMs out. We really do appreciate all the interest we've gotten so far. Flip over to you, my friend. Carter Hart, expectations at all this year? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, this is a tricky one, and this is what I mean about trying to bring you guys as fantasy GMs all of the news so that you got in your back pocket what's going down and what to do. And this might be a little bit of a farther out situation. He's not going to be able to play NHL hockey until December 1st. But this is still a guy who, at 27 years old, he was 12-9-3 with the Flyers before in his last bit of NHL hockey, a .906 save percentage, 2.80 goals against. He was a really good goaltender. Excuse me. Let's be clear about that. And the fact that teams like the Vegas Golden Knights, Carolina Hurricanes, and I'm going to throw the Mammoth in there as well as a team, wild card bubble team. These are really good squads that are interested in this player for a reason. By that time of the year, Steele, it's not an if, it's a fact. You are going to have already likely gotten creative with your roster in the blue paint, whether that was because things didn't pan out draft-wise, poor play, or the most likely part, injuries. You can never have too many serviceable goaltenders in your back pocket. So some people might be going, okay, Carter Hart, a guy who hasn't played in the NHL in a couple of years, and I can't even add him on the waiver wire until December. Keep your eyes on what's going on, because if November rolls around, Steele, and there's some bodies dropping like flies and he's already signed to a team, which by the 15th of October he's allowed to do, you might be burning some money or some prospect on a waiver ad and you stash Carter Hart. Speaking of stashing players, all I'm trying to say is this was a good goaltender. If he goes to a good team like the Canes or Vegas Golden Knights, I don't think I need to sell this one anymore. Put all of the legal stuff aside. We're looking at this clearly from a fantasy standpoint. A number one goaltender from the past, not too long ago, is making noise. We're going to bring it to you so you guys know what to do.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I do think it's interesting that he, from what I've seen, he doesn't want to play for a Canadian team. He wants to be somewhere in the States, somewhere obviously fresh. So he's already made it known he doesn't want to go back to Philadelphia. And for those teams to, you know, kind of jump off the page already, Carolina, Vegas, and Utah, I would be a little bit bummed out if it was Utah, because I really like Karel Vejmelka, and I hope, like, if he did sign there, it wouldn't like eat into his minutes. It would be more of a 50-50 split. You know, obviously they got to do what's best for the team. So if I did see somewhere, I would really like Carolina. I think Carolina would be a good spot for him just because of the injury history with Frederik Andersen. I'm not sold at all with Pyotr Kochetkov as well. I don't think he's quite NHL ready at this point, and which we kind of expected him to be. So I've been a little bit disappointed there. I think Carolina would be the best option out of any of those teams, but it's definitely worth taking note of and just being aware of what's going on fantasy hockey wise, NHL wise, and just in the news in general. So Carter Hart, I mean, a year and a half ago, number one goaltender with the Philadelphia Flyers, and just, you know, a lot of things happen. So we're going to stick with it, focus only on the fantasy hockey aspect of it.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just good to have his name circled moving forward.
Career 906 save percentage. He can play. And if I were to power rank where I could see him going, and all of these markets make sense, Steele, for a guy wanting to perhaps escape the limelight of the Canadian hockey media. So I would probably have to put, if I were to choose it from that side, Utah at the top of the list. But where I think he makes the most sense for me, is actually Carolina as well. So pay attention. He goes to Carolina. That's one of the best defensive clubs in the league. And now you really hope you paid attention to what was going on with Carter Hart. So tick that little flag, put him in the watch list, and keep it tapped. Do the exact same with the pod is what I'm trying to spit out.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. We will be back more tomorrow with everything you need to know fantasy hockey wise. Make your second listen the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We bring you the league-wide stories that matter the most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, and we'll see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.